In a climate-controlled drawer in the basement of the Museo Egizio in Turin, Italy, there is a papyrus that most Egyptologists have seen exactly once. They take the photograph, they note the catalog entry, and they move on. It is listed under inventory number CGT 500,003. It arrived in Turin in 1824, damaged, partially reassembled, some pieces missing entirely. Most people walk right past it. It looks like a long list. Names in columns, numbers beside them. A clerical document, maybe? Administrative records from a royal archive? Nothing dramatic, but hidden inside it is something that shouldn't exist. Because this papyrus, known today as the Turin King List, or the Turin Royal Canon, does not begin with the first pharaoh. It does not begin with Narmer, or with Menes, or with any human ruler at all. It begins with a list of builders, a list of rulers who governed Egypt before the dynasties existed, before the pyramids, before recorded civilization began. And it names them. Not a myth, not a metaphor. Names, titles, reign lengths, written in the same administrative hand used to track grain supplies and tax records. If you've never heard of this document, that's by design, and by the end of this video, you'll understand why. If this kind of investigation is what you're here for, subscribe now. We go deep on every single one. The Turin Royal Canon is a papyrus dated to the reign of Ramesses II, approximately 1179 BCE, making the physical document roughly 3,300 years old. It was found in Thebes, modern Luxor, by the Italian antiquities dealer Bernardino Drovetti, who purchased it from a private collector around 1820. When it arrived in Turin, the French scholar Jean-François Champollion, the very man who cracks the Rosetta Stone, examined it. He was one of the first to recognize what it actually contained. His notes describe a document unlike any other in the Egyptian record, a structured, bureaucratic list of rulers going back to a period the scribes themselves called the time before the flood. Champollion died before he could complete his analysis. The papyrus sat in fragments for decades, and when modern scholars finally pieced it together, they found something the academic world has spent the last century quietly explaining away. Here's where it gets strange. The Turin Canon is divided into sections. The later sections are conventional. They list historical pharaohs we know, names that match the Abydos king list, the Saqqara tablet, the Palermo stone. Cross-referenced and confirmed. Those sections are accepted without question. But the earlier sections are different. They list two categories of pre-dynastic rulers. The first are called the Netcherou, the divine ones. The second group carries a designation that appears nowhere in mainstream tourist descriptions of ancient Egypt. In the original hieratic script, they are called the Shemsu-Hor, the followers of Horus. And between these two groups, the papyrus records a total of more than 13,000 years of organized rule in the Nile Valley. Before the first dynasty, before 3100 BCE, stretching back to a period that archaeology tells us was Neolithic, hunter-gatherers with flint tools, no cities, no administration, no writing. Certainly no kings. For decades, scholars dismissed it as symbolic, a creation myth dressed in administrative clothing. The long reign lengths, some individual rulers credited with hundreds of years, were explained as literary exaggeration, the way ancient cultures projected divine authority backward through impossible time. That was the consensus. Safe, tidy, comfortable. But that explanation has a problem. The problem is in the precision. Administrative records do not use symbolic numbers. Tax ledgers do not round figures to poetic extremes. The Turin Canon lists individual rulers with reign lengths of 72 years, 54 years, 310 years, 620 years. These are not the numbers of myth-making. These are the numbers of record-keeping. And the scribes who wrote them treated them with the same matter-of-fact consistency they applied to everything else in the document. No editorial distance, no ritual language, no call to reverence, just columns, just names, just numbers. The first clue is in that precision. The ancient source does not say these kings reigned for time beyond counting. It counts. Exactly. That is not how you write a legend. That is how you write a ledger. The second clue is in the title. Shemsu-Hor, followers of Horus, is not a vague spiritual designation. In Egyptian administrative texts of the dynastic period, it refers specifically to a lineage, a succession of rulers who carry forward a particular form of governance, a dynasty in everything but name. The mainstream interpretation reads it as a mythological brotherhood, semi-divine beings in the cosmic sense. But consider what happens if you read it the way the scribes wrote it, literally, as a political institution, a school of governance, a civilization that passed its knowledge from generation to generation across 13,000 years, eventually producing the culture we call dynastic Egypt. And then consider this. In 2017, a team of geneticists published a landmark study in Nature Communications. They analyzed ancient DNA from pre-dynastic and early dynastic Egyptian mummies. What they found was unexpected. The genetic profile of the earliest dynastic Egyptians showed significant differences from what came immediately before them in the archaeological record. The pre-dynastic population had one signature. The early pharaonic class had another. Not a gradual drift, a discontinuity. As if a separate population, organized, distinct, already established, merged with or absorbed an existing culture and produced what we call ancient Egypt. Not similar, not slightly different, genetically discontinuous. They weren't guessing. They were recording. The third clue is structural. The Turin Canon's pre-dynastic section ends with a summary line. Damaged now, several fragments missing entirely, but scholars have reconstructed its probable meaning from context and comparative texts. The summary appears to say something like, "These are the ones who came before. These are the ones who established the seat of the double crown." In other words, the scribes of Ramesses II were not inventing a mythological past. They were citing a founding record, a transfer of authority. They believed they were the heirs to something older, and they believed it enough to inscribe it in an administrative canon. Then, modern science found something that changed everything. In 2022, ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted near Abydos, the site long associated with Egypt's earliest dynastic burials, detected a series of subsurface anomalies at depths between 7 and 12 meters. Not natural geological formations, regular spacing, right-angle geometry. The survey was published as a preliminary report and flagged for further excavation. That excavation was scheduled. Then it was deprioritized. The site is under the jurisdiction of the Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities. The follow-up radar data has not been publicly released. The lead archaeologist on the initial survey gave one interview, mentioned the word pre-dynastic administrative structure, and has not commented on the site since. The report was filed, and then, for all practical purposes, it stopped. It was sealed. It was mapped, and then it disappeared. Now, does this prove the most extreme version of the story? Probably not. The long reigns in the Turin Canon may reflect a conflation of dynasties, parallel lineages counted consecutively rather than simultaneously, artificially stretching the timeline. The genetic discontinuity in the nature study may reflect migration patterns we haven't fully mapped yet. The radar anomalies at Abydos may turn out to be natural mineral deposits, or the remnants of already documented early period mud brick architecture. That's the honest version, the conservative version. And it's still fascinating, because even in the conservative version, you are left with a papyrus written by the most meticulous record keepers in human history, who deliberately included a pre-dynastic administrative lineage stretching back thousands of years, complete with names, titles, and reign links. They put it in the same document as their verified historical records. They treated it the same way. No one has explained why they would do that if it meant nothing. And if it means something, if even a fraction of what the Turin Canon implies is accurate, then it means our history is missing a chapter. Not a chapter about gods, a chapter about people, organized people. People who administered a Nile Valley civilization across millennia before the first stone of the first pyramid was quarried. People whose names are written down, who ruled in succession, who were remembered, and who were eventually written out of the official story. Not maliciously, maybe, but completely. The way institutions always erase what complicates the founding myth. The Turin papyrus is still in Turin. Inventory number CGT 54003. You can view parts of it online. The pre-dynastic columns are translated, cataloged, and explained in 2 paragraphs of footnote text in most major Egyptology volumes. The Abydos radar site is still there, beneath the desert floor, at a depth somewhere between 7 and 12 meters. No one has dug it up. The follow-up survey has not happened. The scroll named them. We just haven't decided yet whether we're ready to look. If this investigation moved you, hit like and subscribe. There is far more buried underneath the official record, and we're not done excavating. Watch the next video to find out what the Palermo stone says about the ones who came before the followers of Horus. That story is even older, and even less explained.